Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Postgame Podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Rob Harrington. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Check out Johnny T-Shirt on East Franklin Street or online at johnnytshirt.com, and also email Matt at congruityhr.com for your free assessment for that small to mid-sized business. They'll hook you up. They did it to themselves, made themselves a national brand. They can make your small to mid-sized business big time. Rob Harrington, a blowout win for North Carolina. The Cal Bears' first leg of their East Coast swing this week did not go well. Carolina, I would characterize it as a Carolina game we've come to expect over the years. Certainly not terribly recently, but this is the type performance that we've kind of expected from Carolina basketball throughout the years. What do you think?
I thought so. Yeah, I was going to make a comment about historic ACC rival Cal Berkeley. But yes, this was the type of game that you would get in the 80s and the 90s. You know that they're going to win. They make it look easy. A lot of guys have good games. It was a confidence builder. It was a metrics builder. That's different from the old days, but it was a metrics builder as well because they certainly weren't expected to beat them by that much. And they held on through the end. They didn't give up a lot of points late. You know, we have to care about that stuff now. So I thought all in all, a very positive outing, 4 wins in a row. You and I have discussed previously if they could string together 2 wins, then they might be able to build something as just to get a couple of wins in the bank. And now with 4, suddenly this team is starting to look a little better. Yes, caveats competition, but still, that nice gaudy record in the conference now. Good outcome.
Yeah, Carolina continues to stack the wins. Somebody in the chat says it. Justin Jackson talked about it earlier this week on Inside Carolina. They've got Stanford coming up this weekend. That's another opportunity to put another block on the resume. You mentioned the competition. The ACC is so bad. I mean, I look around the league and it's just not good. But blowing teams out, Rob, and your point earlier, they allowed Cal to have 24 points in the second half. That is not something Carolina's done, especially when they've had a lead. How important is that to keep the pedal down? I mean, you want to see the walk-ons and the guys that don't get to play much get an opportunity. But I feel like these days, especially in Carolina's situation, we'll call it, you got to blow people out because they look at that stuff. I think it's ridiculous, but they do. And your thoughts on how Carolina was able to do that tonight, consistently keeping Cal from getting anything going?
I thought that they sped up Cal. Cal's transition defense was abysmal, and that did make it easier. But still, you give the Tar Heels credit for putting a lot of pressure on them. And I thought on that end of the floor, even in half-court possessions, the team spread the ball around well. I liked the ball movement, quick passing. I think the move away from R.J. Davis dominating the offense, which is what they were asking him to do. He's not having to do that anymore. He's still obviously not getting it together as a scorer, but I think that is leading to broader ball distribution, more good shots for more players. Defensively, I can't make up my mind. They have an extremely impressive 3-point defense percentage in the conference, but to me it looks like they're giving up plenty of open threes that teams are just missing. We went through this last year too, where the defense probably looked better than it actually was. I don't like to ascribe everything to luck. I do think they're catching some good breaks, but at the same time, they are certainly defending better than they were 3 weeks ago. I mean, there's no question because the team was so bad defensively then. They're a lot better now. They're switching more intelligently. I think they're being more decisive on the decisions that they make and pick and roll, and all of that is showing up in the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about individual performances, and let's do that here for a minute. I think this game is bigger than individual performances, but Ian Jackson continues to do it. I mean, another 20. I'll be honest, it's tough to watch when it's just a smooth win and the opponent is so bad. But Ian Jackson, he draws eyeballs. Like he draws them on the court. He draws them, Jim Boeheim said he's really good. He's not just good. He's really, really good. And you see a player like that and his evolution. Rob, do you think it was him? I know it's some of both, but I want to get your expert take here. He got used to the college game but he's also gotten a lot more opportunity in the last 2 or 3 weeks. He's certainly taken full advantage of every opportunity he's had.
No question. I think we talked about this before too. I think he's getting some of the ball screens now at the top of the key that previously would go to R.J. Davis. The one thing that Jackson always has had is elite body control. You really saw it on that drive right in the second half with the 3-point play with the banker high off the glass. That was a much more difficult shot than he made it look, because he was contorting, and he has great touch around the rim that way. He is really the player who's designed for a Hubert Davis offense with an open lane, because when he gets in those spaces and he gets a couple of steps, he can make you miss. He can make the defender miss, make you commit, and then bend around them. And the shots don't always look very difficult. But when you compare his attempts in the lane to everyone else's, then you can see the quality difference. Athleticism people think about as running and jumping, but I think agility is wildly overlooked as a basketball athletic attribute. And Jackson is the one who has the most of that by far, and it shows up possession to possession as he's getting more confident. He's shooting the lights out too, but as they have to guard him honestly, you see all the things he can do, even though he isn't an elite ball handler or playmaker yet. Just based on his agility alone and his touch around the rim, he's just a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, he makes the we always talk about quarterbacks making off-platform throws. Jackson, you mentioned that agility, his ability to sort of contort his body in ways to make the difficult look easy. It is fun to watch a player sort of escalate like he's done, and give Hubert Davis some credit here. He's allowed him, and R.J. Davis, because R.J.'s stepped back a little bit, but he's allowed him to take that role, and it's paid off for North Carolina. 20 points on 8 of 15 shooting. That's what I like to see. 20 points on 6 of 22 shooting. Hell, I could do that. You'd like to think you could, but he's shooting 50% or whatever he's doing. It shows his maturity. He's not taking a lot of wild shots, and he's scoring when he has to. And another thing, 7 rebounds. You take that every night from him. I think that and the defensive end, Rob, is what really can escalate him to be a high-level ACC player, not just a Carolina player on this team, but an ACC player. Speak to the defensive side a little bit.
Yeah, I should have done it already. I mean, he's made immense strides that way. I think his improvement tracks with the team's overall defensive improvement. Certainly, he has the athleticism, and I think now he's getting his assignments better. He's picked it up pretty quickly. I would say both he and Powell have impressed me as quick studies for freshmen. And Jackson certainly on that end of the court. At first it was like, okay, well, just don't hurt the team so that you can contribute on offense. Now he's playing as an asset on both ends. I think at this point he's on track to get some type of all ACC honors. I don't know what team it would be, but I think he's clearly the best player on this team. And right now it's one of the best teams in the league. Whatever you think about that record, it is a good record. And even with 20 teams playing now, or whatever, the 18 teams, the huge conference schedule, it's a long season with a lot of games to play. But I think right now he would have to be first or second team all league, and I think don't think there'd be a lot of controversy around that.
Yeah, I think it'll depend on where Carolina finishes, but the voters are they'll vote for the young guys now. We've seen that over the last few years, and Ian Jackson certainly, especially if you consider ACC only. Absolutely, he deserves at least a shot there. Long way to go. Carolina has plenty of games left. We're talking with Rob Harrington here on the Inside Carolina Postgame. Shout out 350 plus on a Wednesday night after a blowout win against longtime rival, as Rob said, California Golden Bears. Rob, I thought it was interesting. They said, and Boeheim talked about it again, I really enjoy listening to him call a game. He doesn't talk a ton, but I'll take him over Corey Alexander 8 days and 400 days a year. But Elliot Cadeau, they said, you're going to shoot it tonight. And Cadeau did, 7 for 15 for 15 points. His confidence is a thing, probably more so than any player on this team, I believe, that he has to have or a lot of confidence to perform. Your thoughts, what did you see from Elliot tonight that maybe showed that confidence is coming back?
I was very happy to see him look to score, especially in light of the fact that Davis continues to struggle as a scorer. They need some scoring punch from the backcourt. As crazy as it is to say that with RJ back there, but I was glad to see Elliott pick up the slack. The real test for him is when they go on the road again. They play an elite opponent, and he has to show not just confidence. I agree with you, his confidence is rising again, but resilience. When you get a bad call, when you have a couple of turnovers, he had some sloppy turnovers tonight, but it was a low stress situation. What happens on the road when that happens? I think he's building again, and I was very happy to see him look to score. Now the next step will be, okay, you want to be a leader of the team, rally the guys when things aren't going well. That's the bridge the team still has to cross. I mean, they've won some close games, but let's see them pull through an environment, against a better quality opponent, which will be a couple of games from now, most likely. But I'm still looking for that from him. But I was very happy to see him look to score. The mid-range jump shots, I think he has that shot in his bag. You just haven't seen it very often, and I think he needs it.
Yeah, I love guys with mid-range games, and we saw, one of probably not going back too far old school, but Joe Forte had that mid-range game, and you can score a ton of points. If you can hit an 8 to 15, 16-foot jumper, you can score a ton. And one person that did that a couple times tonight was Jalen Washington. He took that shot against NC State. He's taking that baseline, that short corner shot. Reminds me of Serge Zwicker. I mean, people that have followed Carolina forever, Serge Zwicker would kill you with that little 10-foot corner jump shot. That's Jalen Washington's game, right, Rob? And we haven't seen it a lot. We saw it some tonight.
I think they are doing a much better job now of finding the rollers. Not only Washington but also Lubin, and Washington I think is getting more comfortable looking for his offense. He's not just a screen setter anymore. That's certainly a big part of what he'll continue to do. But I love the fact that he's willing to shoot. I like him probably better from 12 feet than I do 15 feet. I know P has been touted as a deeper perimeter shooter, but I like him a lot more right now in that shorter 10 to 12 foot range, and I think he'll get a lot of open attempts there because people aren't really playing him for it, and it's hard to stop anyway because he has a high release with a real nice touch. So I think that's a building block for them. Lubin will be more situational with his stuff, I think, because certain matchups it just doesn't work as well for him. I still like for them to look for him when he is there. But Washington, I think they can build in as more, I wouldn't say featured to be too strong a word, but as a more prominent part of the offense, let's put it that way, as more of a regular shooter. Again, taking some pressure off the guards and giving the offense more balance. And we have to mention, too, how much he's improved defensively also.
Yeah, absolutely. When you get the blocks, he didn't have a lot of blocks tonight. Didn't have a lot of opportunity tonight, and credit Cisco for Cal that he had a great game, 8 of 9 shooting, and sort of didn't give Washington those opportunities. But you mentioned Lubin. Lubin tonight, 3 for 3, 7 points, 8 rebounds in just 15 minutes. You will take that all day.
It's a great game
and
for
that's him. And that's what Carolina really needs. If they can get that type game, Rob, from both him and Washington, then you've got an all-ACC caliber big man. If you can combine guys out there, how important is it for Lubin to produce, regardless of what he plays, minutes-wise, but to produce when he's out there?
I mean, it's hugely important, and again, because we talked about how the balance was missing earlier this year, and now they're getting more of that, I think. I also, have been harping since the summer. I don't like the platoon situation where you have a big committee of guys. I like the fact that they're starting to develop a real 1-2 punch with Washington and Lubin. I do think that Washington is pretty clearly ahead of him now when you factor in defense especially. But Lubin has been a solid player. We know that from last year when he was in the SEC at Vanderbilt. I think that he certainly has a role on the team as the number 2 big guy. I don't see Washington as someone who needs to play 30 minutes. Not like that. So something like a 24-16 split could work out really well the rest of the year.
Yeah, and someone in chat, and shout out to it, he had 3 blocks. Lubin had 3 blocks. He's undersized, but he plays hard. He's got some hands of stone sometimes, and then Cadeau will throw the ball at his feet too often, and it leads to some of those turnovers we talked about from Elliott. But who have we not talked about? What did we see tonight, Rob, that maybe we haven't mentioned that's important? The defense, I think, was fantastic. Cal missed shots. But when you hold a team that hits 7 or 8 threes a game to 3 out of whatever they were, 25 or something ridiculous, that's a plus. You take that. But what have we missed?
I want to hit again on tempo. I thought this was a very clear example of what Hubert Davis is trying to do in terms of up tempo, because it looked like some of the Roy Williams teams where they were running after made baskets. And of course, they were running after missed baskets. They even got some steals, which is not something they frequently do. And they were cashing in those opportunities, getting the guards out in the open floor. I think that was the plan throughout the off season. If we have all these great guards, let's get them in transition, play them fast. Now, again, we'll see how that translates again against a higher caliber of opponent. It didn't go very well early in the year, although I think a lot of that was due to the transition defense. Actually, it was less of an issue scoring some of the time. At least it was more of an issue they just weren't getting back effectively. That was one. I thought that Jalen Withers, after a few minutes in the prior game, gave them some solid play tonight. It was good to see him out there being assertive in whatever role he plays. They obviously have a riddle to solve at the 4 that may not be something that they can untangle this season. Obviously, Dre Powell has taken command of that position in large part, but they still need some size sometimes. So I like the fact that Withers is getting his time at the 4. I'd love to see him get a little bit at the 5, although as mentioned, I like the 1-2 punch. Those are important takeaways to me on a night where there's no reason to nitpick anyone. How much micro analysis do you want to do in a game like this where you beat a team? Even when they were up 6 or 8 points, I never felt like the outcome was in jeopardy. It was very much like you said, those 80s or 90s Carolina basketball games where you just kind of knew where it was headed.
Yeah, you had to get to the full 40 minutes, and you knew what the outcome is. People in the chat have mentioned this guy, and I want to mention him because I think it's important. Seth Trimble. I felt like the first couple games when he was back, he didn't seem, he's not starting. He had been starting. Maybe there was some reintroduction period going on there. But one thing I like seeing out of Seth is making his free throws. He goes hard to the rim. He'll get some rebounds, but he makes his free throws. Rob, how difficult do you think it is for a guy to, and I know it's a guy by guy or player by player basis, but you're starting, you're playing well, you get hurt, you come back, and now you're coming off the bench. That's an adjustment. I don't care what people say about it's not who gets starters minutes or whatever, starting, not starting, and being injured. How big a role does Seth Trimble have on this team now that Ian has emerged? Elliot's gaining some confidence. I still think Seth Trimble's a guy, especially on the defensive end, that Carolina needs to perform at a high level every night.
For sure, he still has to be the ace defender, and I thought that he did a great job. We talked about tempo. He was getting out for longer release passes. He was the beneficiary of quite a few of those passes, so I thought he did a really good job there. I mean, you're right. In a perfect and moral world, you wouldn't lose your job over an injury when you're playing well. But as we discussed at the time, you can't put Ian Jackson on the bench anymore. The genie's out of the bottle, and someone has to sit. And he's the one who is the least involved in the offense from play to play. So that was sort of the way it was going to go. But I'm glad to see him. I was happy to see him back out there looking to score a bit more. I'd still like to see him shoot more threes. I thought he passed up at least one that he had. He's doing well playing off 2 feet, doing a lot of other good things, but I think that he has more to offer as a scorer, and they just need him to be more assertive and to just take more attempts.
Yeah, he had 6 rebounds as well, no turnovers. The reason I mentioned the starting thing, and somebody in the chat said I was going old school. If folks remember back to, was it 97, 98 with the 6-man starting rotation that Guthridge had? Or yeah, it was Guthridge's team that it rotated on who started. Go back and look at the stats based on somebody like Shammond Williams, whether he started or not in those games. It matters to folks for whatever reason. I think it says a lot about a player, Rob, and agree or disagree with me, that can either start or come off the bench as long as they're given quality minutes and quality opportunities when they're out there.
I agree. It's a skill because you're in the locker room, you're getting loose, and the first thing you do when the game starts is you sit. and you get colder, and it's not as easy as going straight into the game. So it's not as easy as it sounds. It does matter. And it matters to players. Whatever I think about it, and I might look at a 6-man as equivalent to the other guys. The players care, and that's why Bill Guthridge shuffled things the way that he did. He was trying to be to show equality to everyone, and he didn't want to have to pick a favorite 5. And it was a great team, and it mostly worked. Although, as you mentioned, you could sort of diagnose some player performances that tracked with who came off the bench that game. It wouldn't. I think most coaches would probably not do that. But at any rate, I really admire Trimble because he seems, I don't know what he's saying behind the scenes, but on the court he doesn't mope. He's still leading the team when he's out there. He's giving you a lot of effort on defense. He seems to be reintegrating into the offense after having whatever injury he had, head injury. So I'm very pleased with. I think everyone's probably pleased to see him taking it well, even though I hope that somewhere behind the scenes it's getting acknowledged, the sacrifice that he's making without making a fuss about it or pouting.
Yeah, absolutely. Carolina beats Cal 79-53. Almost 500 people in the chat. Carolina's got Stanford on Saturday. Then I believe, if my memory serves, they've got Wake Forest. Yep, they've got Wake next week, and then Boston College the weekend after. And then, Rob, you get into the Pitt string. I don't think we can overstate the importance for Carolina to get these next 3 wins for their NCAA tournament hopes at this point. Even though they're 5-1 in the conference now, they're going to have some tough games. The importance of the next 3 games for Carolina, Rob, to you?
Absolutely critical. They actually have the opportunity, I think, if they win all 3. At Wake especially is a dangerous one, though. I wouldn't put that in the same category as Stanford at home or Boston College anywhere. But apart from that, if they win all 3, I would say they probably wouldn't even be on the bubble anymore. That's the funny thing is you go into this huge stretch of games, you're not on the bubble. Now, if you do poorly with the 2 Pitt games, Duke and Clemson, then you could be back on the bubble. But with an 8-1 conference record, even in the ACC in its current condition, that's not a bubble team. And we're going to start seeing some of these SEC teams that are still relying on their strong non-conference play start to have really poor in-conference records. And the question will be over time: well, how much more is an SEC record worth? Is it a 4-game difference? Is that the equivalent of an ACC team with 4 games above 500 will be like a 500 SEC team? We'll see how that shakes out. But if you're 8-1, it's not really that much of a concern. And then the opportunity would be to cement them not being on the bubble. Can you get 2 of those games as a win? First things first, though, go into the next 3. Stanford at home is that's another opportunity to hopefully have an easier one. And then they go into Wake Tuesday night, which I think will be tough just because of who it is and where it is.
Yeah, Wake Forest has always been a tough out for North Carolina over there, even when Carolina's been elite. You go look at some of the past seasons, going old school again. Carolina's won a ton of games, and they've lost at Wake Forest. But they get one tonight, and they get one handily over California, 79-53. That's Rob Harrington. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Email Matt at congruityhr.com. Like I said earlier, everybody stay safe, stay warm. We'll be back on Saturday. And stay tuned for the rest of the Inside Carolina podcast, shows, specials, just a ton of content at Inside Carolina with everybody chipping in. Rob, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Tommy.